Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome to EnterVR. This is the podcast where we talk about everything virtual reality. I am your host, Chris Miranda, and today I have Nick Pitton on the show. Nick, you are you ride into the sunset under the username Red of Paul on Reddit, and you are also the creator of the Boiler Room, the Spirited Away virtual reality recreation / experience. Thanks for coming on the show, Nick.
Thanks for having me. Yes, I'm all of those things.
So there's so much going on this week that I want to also hit up, GDC, the VR Mixer. But let's talk about you first. Where did you get the inspiration? Where did you get the idea to come up with the Boiler Room from Spirited Away?
It was one of those things where I'd got the Rift. And I thought because I just wanted one, and I thought maybe I'll do some development at some point, but I just kind of had to have one. But I've just been kind of messing around and working with Unity for a little while, and at the time I thought, well, I don't really know where I'm going with this. I'll do a tower defense, or I'll do the sort of games that I enjoy. And then I saw the demo Blocked In, which is it's just so well realized, and it looks so convincing, and it runs so well. I just thought, wow, and it's such a simple, just a vignette where you're there and you're looking around, and I thought, you know what, I can see all the pieces that to make that. I can put that together in my head, how that's put together, and I thought, you know what, I can do this now. I've got all the bits I need. I can make something. And then I kind of thought, well, what am I going to make? And I looked around and I thought, there's so many great experiences. There's horror games, there's stuff. But I think it was Blocked In, and then also Redshift. I thought, well, there's something in that. The way they're just very strong visually, and they're just about exploring. I thought, what could I do? And I just thought, well, why don't I recreate something that's already out there? And I know the limitations with Unity and the limitations with VR. It's difficult for that high visual fidelity AAA game stuff. And I'm not that experienced enough to do it. I thought, well, what's the opposite of that? And I was kind of thinking cartoons. And I thought, well, something like a Studio Ghibli film. And then it kind of went through those stages. And Spirited Away was the first Ghibli film that I saw. I saw it in the cinema, and I kind of fell in love with the style. And this was after 3D films, like Toy Story, already rolling. And this kind of showed that 2D films and illustrated stuff, that kind of artistry still had a place. And so I just thought, well, I'm definitely going to do that. And from there, it was sort of just finding a scene in the film that was iconic, but that was also fitted my restrictions in terms of technical abilities, and also because I'd not done it before, I wanted something that was self-contained and doable, and that I felt was challenging, but not so challenging I wouldn't be able to do it. Right. And it just fit all the criteria, and it's a great little scene.
Yeah, it is an amazing. I mean, the sense of presence is truly amazing inside of there. And then I look down in my body, I'm like, oh my god, I'm the little girl. So that was a nice touch you added. Before we go further onto that, what is your background? Where are you coming from into Rift development?
I'm a freelance video guy. I do sort of animation and editing and motion graphics and things like that. And I've done all kinds of different things in that area for years. I just made a short film my first live action short film.
Wow.
And at the time I'd been writing scripts and things like that, and it was all kind of that's all that kind of video stuff I've done. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where I've not stuck to one area, but currently it's mainly motion graphics, with the idea of maybe moving into doing film and more drama-y type things like that on sort of a directing side of things. But I think since doing this, I kind of feel there's something about being able to do the VR side of things and doing it, I guess, almost all yourself. Film is so much more demanding; it requires so much more resources and people, and yet you can I can kind of do a lot more of what I want to do with VR. So yeah, it's kind of, I've come from kind of motion graphics and animation. I'd like to move more towards VR now as a thing. What I'd like.
What did you? What attracted you in the first place? I mean, you sort of already hit that point, but I want to just sort of reiterate what is it about virtual reality that attracts you the most? What was the thing that made you make the jump?
I think everyone. Well, most people kind of have this. VR's cool, VR is like a holodeck. It's the kind of the future technology that never quite seemed like it was ever going to happen. Mm-hmm. I think even when I first saw that John Carmack video where he had Palmer Lucky's first prototype, and it was like a phone screen attached to a couple of lenses strapped to the head. I thought, well, that's neat, but that's not going to work, is it? That's a good gimmick, and I liked it, but I thought there's no way that's going to become the VR everyone thinks it needs to be. And then obviously, the Kickstarter happened and everything kicked off, and you're kind of like, oh well, actually, these guys sort of seem to know what they're doing. Yeah. They sort of seem to have, and then I think it's, as with everyone else, it was sort of the slow realization. That actually, no, this is properly gonna take off. The more you see it, the more you realize, wow, this is definitely, and it was sort of like I said, I didn't grab, I wasn't on the Kickstarter, and I think it was December that I finally got ordered a dev kit, and I guess I was not late, but I wasn't early.
Did you order the dev kit without trying? By the way, did you order the dev kit without trying the Rift first, or?
Yeah, there was no. I'm in the UK. I couldn't find anywhere or see any opportunities to try one. So no, I just ordered one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm in the same camp with you in terms of that skepticism at the beginning. It really took me trying the Rift for me to become a believer, but for you to make the leap of faith without having tried it, I mean, that's pretty good, man.
Well, I think it was, just that first video, I think it was the one that I was skeptical about. Mm-hmm. Because it was just there's something, the VR that we're looking at now, it was just a kind of something that never seemed like it was going to happen. But yeah, once I started seeing things, the first dev kits, the first prototypes that were proper, not just a phone strapped to your face, I think that was like, wow, this is, I kind of bought into the hype early enough, I think, after that.
And you did the right thing, man. In terms of going back to Boiler Room, did you create the animations and you created the the assets and the art? Where did that come from?
Yeah, I think I did all of it, and the reason is because I kind of wanted to do it all. That was part of the challenge. I thought, if I'm going to do this, I have to prove to myself that I can do it all. And I'm not a coder. My coding experience has been, the past year of learning Unity. Mm-hmm. And my skill set is not in coding. And I don't think, as much as I've learned, I don't think I'm ever going to be a coder. So it was kind of, I thought, well, I've got to show I'm good at something, or I've got to prove my worth somehow. Yeah. So being able to do it all felt like that's a good challenge. And so I'd done 3D stuff for a few years, but it had always been technically not particularly correct. I'd not learned, all the intricacies, and I made sure I took time. I sat down and thought, right, I got to do this right, because it's got to be, it's got to fit inside the restrictions of VR and the performance restrictions in Unity and everything like that. So I made sure that I learned how to do those things technically correct. But it's not impossible. I mean, the tutorials are all out there. I think it's the sort of thing anyone can learn, which is nice.
That's awesome. How long did it take you from start to finish?
Start to finish, about probably 5 to 6 weeks. I spent on the final 3 weeks. I was working on it every night, probably 3-4 hours or something like that.
Wow. And what about the sound? And where did you get the audio from?
The audio itself is from the film.
Yeah,
because I'm not an audio guy, and it's sort of, I thought, well, it's got to be authentic.
Yeah.
So I thought the easiest way to do that is to have it from the film. It's one of the things I'd love to use original assets for the audio as well, but I that's beyond me, sadly. But it's all there in the film. It's one of those legally grey areas that I'm a bit sort of hoping Disney doesn't pay attention to.
In terms of because I was wondering where is your goal? What is your end goal with this project? Are you planning on monetizing? Are you planning on selling it off to Disney? What's your goal?
Oh no. There's no monetization at all in any of these particular demos. I mean, I think all this is just literally, half of it's fun, half of it's like a personal hobby project because I want to do it, and there's something really satisfying about making something that's just a self-contained little experience. You do it from start to finish, and there it is, and you're like, wow, I've done something. And the other half is to, I guess, be able to show that I can do it, that I'm able to do it. And so I guess then when I come to the point of making an original project, I can get people involved if I need extra team members. I can, come to people with a proposal for what I'm making and maybe do a Kickstarter or something like that.
In terms of that, what you just touched on, I think we are looking at the resume of the future, or the portfolio of the future. What can you do? Well, put on the Rift and check out what I can build. So that's definitely valuable. So, what are your next projects? Are you sticking with Spirited Away? I've heard rumors that you're working on My Neighbor Totoro. Is that the case?
Yes, I'm doing Totoro right now, and I've got Totoro made up. He's basically finished, and I'm doing Cat Bus now, and then I'll be working. Totoro's a really difficult one, and I only really realised how difficult it was after I started it, because the actual location itself, when you're watching the cartoon, you kind of think, it's just a bunch of trees and then a bus stop. Yeah. But then you watch it, and every single shot where you see from other angles, you realise the road goes around the corner, and there's this little shrine hidden in the forest, and the actual geometry layout of it is not particularly obvious. So it's trying to figure all that out, and then how it's made, and there's a lot of challenges, especially because it's a forest. There's trees, there's leaves, there's plants, and attempting to make that is technically, works well in Unity, but also matches and looks like the film. It's very, very challenging. So that's the next challenge that I'm about to move on to.
That sounds amazing, what you're working on. Are you planning on making a full-fledged, self-enclosed little world, or is this going to be point A to point B sort of thing?
In this particular scene, it's literally... what happens in the actual scene is the girls are waiting for the bus, and as they're waiting, Totoro turns up, and then they sort of hand him an umbrella, and he dances around a bit. Then the cat bus turns up and takes Totoro away, and then they're left alone again. So actually, I think what it will be is this little self-contained loop where you'll be at the bus stop, and then Totoro will turn up and the cat bus will turn up, and then they'll leave, and then you'll be able to restart that experience. But also there'll be some interactive points along the way, so you can control that experience. It won't just run on a loop automatically. And and you'll be able to explore the location a little bit. There'll have to be an end to the location. You won't be able to walk for miles up the road or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's another challenge. I mean, do you stick an invisible wall? Do you stop the player wandering past your world? But I've got a few ideas on that should hopefully not be too jarring for the player.
Yeah, I'm super excited to hear about this. This is like my somehow in out of all the things that I've because once you try on the Rift, you have VR goggles. You see the world through VR lenses, and everything that every Nintendo games to movies, I'm like, I wonder how this would look like in VR. I wasn't expecting this. I wasn't expecting someone would recreate Studio Ghibli's works of arts in VR, and here you are doing it, and I'm just like just super excited because I'm a huge Studio Ghibli fan. I love My Neighbor Totoro. I love Spirited Away, and so, man, this is crazy. I love what you're doing, man. I'm so excited because what is the value though, like in terms of because I was thinking about this, like how can this be something that people will constantly go back to, or we'll just have to try out. And I thought about this, like maybe in the future, in a far distant parallel universe, when you buy a Blu-ray DVD of your Spirited Away or your Totoro, you have, hey, why don't you, once you finish watching the movie, why don't you go inside that world that you just saw, like a museum, like a tour of that movie? Because I figured, by the way, these Blu-ray prices are ridiculous. I'm not paying that. What the fuck am I paying for? Just but in terms of that, like you could easily justify $50 on paying a Blu-ray and watching the movie, and then all of a sudden I'm in, I can tour that world. But I mean, what other sort of values or value or implementations or applications do you see for what you're doing?
I mean, the thing is, VR, I think most people that have or sort of, I think most people recognize that there's a bigger scope beyond traditional gaming, and there's a bigger scope beyond the other traditional VR areas of military and medical, and there's like a whole area of experiences, and there's a whole area of just kind of existing in spaces. It's like it is a whole new medium, and there's lots and lots of interesting opportunities and places it can go. And I think there's the natural way for it to go is kind of into this nice kind of like area where it's kind of this ambient experience narrative sort of space. There's something there that's yet to form. There's I don't know. It's kind of difficult to articulate what it could be, and that's what's kind of exciting about it. I think there's going to be lots of interesting things come along and chip away at that possibility space, and make lots of really interesting experiences that we've not quite had before. It's an exciting place to be involved and to do things within, and I think it's kind of coming from two different directions. You got the stuff coming from the gaming direction, where people are kind of starting to think, well, how can we put the games that we've been playing into VR, and they're kind of realizing it's not possible. That you can't really turn Street Fighter into a VR game. You can't turn a third-person brawler into a VR game. You kind of have to do things in a new way. And I think people then kind of go the opposite way, and they think, oh, well, how can we make films in VR? Mm-hmm. We could stick a 360-degree camera and have actors run around it. And I think where it's actually going is somewhere in the middle that's not defined in those terms. And I think that's good, because that said, it is a new medium. It's not just a peripheral, and it's not just a new way to watch movies. It's something different. I think that's good.
I think what you're saying is quite genius. I think, I haven't thought of it that way because, it's at this point, in the grand scheme of things, it's Hollywood versus the gaming industry. It's, this $28 billion industry being Hollywood versus this $97 billion industry being the game industry. And here you are, putting a bridge in between the two.
I don't even view it as a bridge between the two. I view it like as its own little island, its own little space that can bridge out to it has its bridges from the island to other things rather than between things. Like I think it's like when mobile games blew up. And everyone's like, "Oh my God, this is where games are now. This is where games going to go." And actually, no, this is what people would, play on their way to work or whatever. It's an extra new area that doesn't cannibalize other areas.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. It's not VR doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to eat film. It doesn't have to eat games. It's its own. It can be a new thing that its own little market and experience. And he doesn't. I think that's the other thing. Like, a lot of people were thinking, "Oh, is this going to blow up? Is this the future? Is this going to take over everything?" And it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be $1 billion industry. It doesn't have to be launched and sell 1 million in the first month. This can grow organically. It doesn't. And there's no. I think with a console when you bring it out. Like the Dreamcast, when it was brought out, it either succeeded or it failed, and then it's got a lifespan and then it dies.
Yeah.
And the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, they've sold millions, and people are still like, "Oh, are they a failure?"
Mm-mm.
And it's just sort of like the idea that selling that bulk of equipment could possibly be a failure. I kind of feels like it's a bit like the way content is being created now. Patreon and other stuff like that, where you don't need thousands and thousands of fans to make content.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to be big channels. You don't need to be filmed. You can just put content out and have a few thousand people enjoy it. VR is, I'm not sure it's a direct parallel, but you don't need it to have the same numbers as consoles. You don't have to, sell iPhone numbers for it to be a success.
Yeah, in terms of, I definitely see your point there. I think that, seeing how Sony's jumping into this game and how seriously it seems that they're taking it, we're talking about a whole nother level of profit and goals and trying to maximize the potential of this technology. And to be frank, I think that this virtual reality and these headsets are going to be so good. I would be hard pressed, to not think about the possibility that this could very well be $1 billion industry. It's just I don't think that people, the average person off the street, is quite ready for the sorts of experiences you and I have been trying out. So in that sense, and it's so diverse. The world that developers are creating is so diverse. This ecosystem of apps and software. Anything from, My Neighbor Totoro and Spirited Away recreations to Firebox and internet browser and virtual reality. It's just insane how versatile this technology can be. But for you personally, what is your business model? What are you aiming to hit it big time, or are you just doing the things that you love and seeing where that takes you?
Yeah, the second one.
Yeah.
Because I can't at the moment justify. I can't say to someone, "Give me 50 grand or 100 grand to make some grand sweeping experience." I kind of feel I've got to prove myself a little bit by making these little experiences. And if people then feel like, "Oh no, this is good. We'd love to see something more." Because the other thing, of course, is I can't make like a Spirited Away game, and I certainly can't sell it. Anything that I'm currently doing. So I have to then think, well, people happy to play, Spirited Away, my little experiences, is what I'm going to then maybe go on and make. Is that something people are actually going to want to pay money for without that original kind of license attached to it? And I think that again comes back to me having to prove it's something, when I do get around to making something, that it is something that people want to play. Because it's that exciting and that kind of fun, and there's something compelling about it on its own terms.
Yeah.
So for now, I kind of feel like if I make these and people find these compelling, then maybe I can move on and do something that else that people find compelling that's original. I've got a few ideas, and I'm moving towards it. But for now, it's kind of quite nice to be able to make these little experiences, because you know, I enjoy them as well.
Mm-hmm.
I like being inside that, and because, you know, I'm making it, sure, but it's still like a world that someone else has imagined.
Yeah.
So when I do finally get to step inside it and look around, there is still that bit of magic for me as well.
Definitely. Have you, thought of the possibility that in a parallel universe, Disney would come up to you and say, Nick, you know, what you're doing is amazing. Can you build us the whole thing? Can you come down to Anaheim or Emeryville, wherever, California, to come build this thing? Would you consider that an offer like that?
I just don't see it happening. I think if they saw what I was doing and
they'd send you the lawyer.
Good idea, they'd make it themselves and then send me a cease and desist. They wouldn't think that my version is no. Yeah, as nice as that sounds, I guess I'm a realist about it.
I think you underestimate the madness that you created. I think I honestly I was blown away inside of there. I felt like I was, you know, this movie, this thing that I saw a couple of years ago is, you know, it was a thing on my screen that I would watch passively, but now it's just what a leap it goes from seeing it passively from 10 feet away on a flat screen to being inside that world. That's
I think that's the VR though, isn't it? There's something like the actual, if you like, because I've spent, you know, weeks and weeks on one particular scene. I mean, there's a certain, you know, sinking time into anything in those terms is going to make something that's visually, you know, especially because it's been designed and it's got a lot of artistry behind it on the original side, where it's already a compelling visual experience even before you make it 3D, and then you spend a few weeks making it 3D and animated, and that's cool. But being able to step inside of something in VR, there's something just about, you know, that presence being there. That I think, you know, it doesn't really, even anything, you know, anything inside VR that's got that presence is a compelling experience. Even like Oculus's test room, where it's like a mannequin and then like grid walls.
Yeah.
You know, you're inside that and you're like, wow, this is great. So to have something where you recognize it as well, I think, it's the VR side of the things that I think is just, there's something, that little bit of magic that people recognize, and I think it's the hardware and everything that's just making it work, I think.
Definitely, I definitely see that. So, are you planning when you make Spirit or My Neighbor Totoro? Is that gonna be, you know, again like a museum sort of tour, or are you in any way, shape, or form thinking about some form of gameplay mechanics with your projects, or, you know, what's your
I mean, I think the first one, obviously the Spirit Away one, I was originally, that was just going to be the room, the physical space. There was the idea that I would make it as animated and as kind of fulfilled as an experience as possible, up to the point of the entire scene, you know, having the characters speaking, or having Lynn come through the door, or you would go through that little cupboard door and into other spaces. So the ambition kind of took me up kind of to way above where I was able to reach. So I kind of, once I'd made it though, and kind of stepped into the physical room a bit, I kind of thought, you know what, this needs those soot sprites to be there. Because if they are not there, it feels empty, and it feels as if you're leaving something really important unsaid with it. So I then did those, and even now I'm not 100% happy with the way they are, because they're not exactly like they are in the film. There's not enough of them, and they don't move quite like they should, and all of that, and there are limitations to the way I've done it that I want to come back to it and make it better. But then when I'd done them and got them working as kind of as they are now, I thought, it's not the same without Kamaji up on these little things. So and actually that Kamaji took about 2 days to do.
Really?
So I was kind of like, to make him took a day. And I was like, oh, that's not bad.
Wow.
That didn't take as long as I thought. And then animating him, putting him in, and everything like that took another day. And I thought that's not too bad. And now I can see ways that I would be able to make him interactive and do things. And I can see ways that I would be able to make the whole scene a lot more it's an experience at the moment where you just look at stuff. And I want it to be a bit more interactive. So the next one with Totoro, I kind of want to make as much of it interactive as possible, at least to the point where you can, press interact and something happens.
Yeah. Did you purposely add in the function where you stand near Kamaji and he look at you and he just sort of stares and he goes back to work? Is that
no? Because he's just on a loop.
Oh, okay.
He looks around.
Because that got me.
Watch him long enough, his animation loops. But I just kind of thought, well, that's just, he doesn't even. I mean, he's not even doing any. His actual animation, if you put it next to the film, it's not actually particularly accurate to how he moves in the film either. He's just kind of good enough at the moment. And I think that's another reason why I look at that and think, oh, it could be better. But it's good enough. But for the Totoro one, I do want it to be so you can interact with the scene a bit more. For instance, in the scene itself, the girls are waiting at the bus stop with an umbrella, and when Totoro turns up, he's just got a leaf on his head, keeping him dry, and they hand Totoro an umbrella.
Yeah.
And I want the player to do that. So there's an umbrella hanging on the bus stand, and you go over to that, you pick it up, and then you go over to Totoro and hand it to him. Which will be fun, and it also, that's going to be part of the scene. I want there to be 2 breaks where players can control the scene continuing, so they can explore the scene while it's happening, and the scene won't just continue on. So they have a chance to look at everything, which is what you want. But also there's the scene will continue playing on as it does in the film.
Yeah.
So, but also equally, this is still going to be limited because the interaction is going to be cursory. It's going to be, you go up to Cat Bus and interact, and it will blink at you or move its head or something. And you go up to Totoro and he'll laugh or something. That to me is fine. I mean, that's a nice bit of interaction, but it's not really yet a game or any kind of adventure experience or anything like that. So for now, that feels like challenge enough. But I think whatever I then go on to do, I do want it to have that little bit more of an actual, not necessarily a challenge, but a bit more of an experience where the player is having an actual effect more than just interacting a bit.
I would ask you who is your target audience, but it is, the way you describe it and just the way you are executing it, this is everyone. Anyone can go in there and move the joystick around and just explore. But do you have...
Yeah, I think anyone, the target audience is probably people who would like the film, mm-hmm. or who would like that, Studio Ghibli films. So that's a good thing, I guess, about that form of game and storytelling, a bit like Stanley Parable or Gone Home or something. The target audiences are people who enjoy the experience and the story, rather than kids because it's a kiddie type of experience game, or DayZ is aimed more at like adults because it's a hardcore experience. I guess it's less aimed at I think it's one of those things where it's working out. I know, it's like a book,
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm rambling a bit.
I know. I think it's extremely accessible. I think my grandma can go in there and after watching Spirited Away or my neighbor and she could be like, oh snaps, this place actually exists somewhere in the metaverse. I don't know. She wouldn't say that. My grandma wouldn't say metaverse. Yeah.
Well, I've stuck in. My mum and my dad, neither of whom play games. They seem to get something out of it, and actually VR in general, I found, has that element where anyone who tries it on can appreciate how cool it is, and can appreciate, they sit in it and go, yeah, this is different and new and kind of cool, and I like it.
Yeah.
And I think anyone, I think it's going to help when things are better, when the hardware's better. I mean, the dev kit too, and the final release, and getting the software to make the best use of all that. I think that's going to make it even better, because at the moment there are still those little barriers. I mean, I can't play Half-Life VR because I just get sick.
Same.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, especially with Half-Life VR, I don't know what it is about that, but I think because actually a lot of experiences that are not native have the problem, because there's so many things about them, especially with the early hardware, the early implementations, that just don't work for VR. And I think, Oculus and the rest have said, look, it's best if you make things for VR. And I don't think you're ever going to really be able to retrofit anything to be, VR accessible. I think anything that people want to play in VR is going to have to be, actual made for VR. But the stuff that is made for VR is extremely accessible, I think, to anyone. Movement's still an issue. I mean, I still find it, the control system in the Spirited Away one, I've changed it, because it was where you were using the control pad where you were moving with the left stick and sort of turning your angle with the right. And at the time I thought, well, this is normal, this is realistic. You walk along and you can look around. Your head doesn't dictate where you move. And then lots of people pointed out, well, actually it's a bit confusing, because I'm looking around and sometimes when I move forward, I don't move in the direction I expect, and it pulls me out of it.
Yeah.
So I then changed it. So the latest version, if you download that now off of my website, it now has it so you will move in the direction that you look.
Yep.
And that's great. I mean, you now no longer have to think about which direction you're going, but then if you're moving forward and you look left, you veer off to the left. And that also sometimes doesn't feel right. So currently there's not really a very good way to move about in these worlds that's flawless. And I think until there's a control system whereby the movement is not something you consciously have to think about, where you can just sort of move the direction you want to move, but also look the direction you want to look, and interact with the world and all those things, it's difficult. And I can understand why Oculus is saying it's one of their big hurdles to pass at some point in the near future.
I think that that's an amazing point you bring up, because these mundane little details for people in the future are extremely important right now for developers. And last night I was playing with the Boiler Room, trying it out, and it was it worked out great, where the direction that I was looking in, I was walking in. And what helped me, so I don't remember who told me this, but they were like, if you're in a stand-up VR experience, it's good to stand up physically. And so I did it standing up, and it actually helped with that disconnect of where am I looking at. So I just sort of shifted my body in the direction where I was looking. Still though, I think that to the point at which it'll become seamless and it'll become consumer ready, where people won't complain about, why am I being decalibrated. I think we're getting there, but it's such an interesting point you bring up in terms of what is there a happy medium, or is this something that we haven't come up with, or someone hasn't thought of that is.
I think for what it is at the moment is like with the DK2 certainly, and maybe the consumer release. It's one of those things where they're targeting a seated experience, and I don't think that's ever going to be 100% natural with a standing, walking around experience in VR. So until there's some kind of bridge. Because I don't think I ever really want to have to stand up all the time to play VR. I kind of think I'm going to want to sit down most of the time. So it's coming up with something that bridges that gap. But maybe because of what VR is, maybe because it is that kind of realistic, I am stepping into a world, maybe there's always going to be a slight disconnect. And maybe that's where things like... Virtuix Omni, the walking treadmill thing, maybe that's where things like that come in, where there is that kind of natural bridge across. I don't know. It's one of those things. There are problems, and some problems perhaps are big ones, and some ones are maybe the things we can live with. I kind of think that's something for now I can live with.
Yeah.
And I think it's what most people, even people who are not used to computer games at all, who just, sit down, put on a helmet, and you give them a controller and they look around and stuff. I think a lot of it's going to come down to the actual experience software, as long as it's quite gentle on them, and it's not expecting them to know to run around or expect them to have to do energetic movements around. I think there's probably a nice kind of middle way that's going to be comfortable. It's kind of weird, though. I've been thinking about it quite a lot, how when I first thought about VR, it was like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. You kind of think, oh my God, this is going to be like the holodeck. And then you kind of recalibrate your expectations when you realize, well, you're still going to have to sit down. It's still just a kind of goggles that sit on your face. and it kind of, you kind of think, oh, well, you can't do things. You can't play the sort of first-person shooters that you normally would. And you can't play beat-em-ups. And you can't play, there's a lot of can'ts about it when you start thinking about it. And then you realize there's lots of stuff you can do. There's lots of experiences in VR that make sense, that don't necessarily make sense as a regular game. They would either, they might seem boring, or the appeal would not be there. But in VR, it's suddenly very, very much there. And I think it's one of those things where you realize what might be restrictions kind of open up new possibilities. I don't even want to say restrictions, because it's not like that at all. The restrictions are much like real life. You can't fly into the air in real life if you don't have a jetpack.
Yeah.
And you can't go diving into the deep sea unless you have a submarine or scuba gear.
Yeah.
That reality of it, I think, gives it that much more of a tangible kind of compelling element. It's much like with the controls. I think, the idea of only being able to move in the direction you're looking at. When I first thought about it, I kind of felt really disappointed. I thought, I'm going to have to do this. This is unfortunate that I have to make the control scheme this way. And then I kind of realised, well, no, because the point of the exercise is not to have an exciting control scheme. The point of the exercise is to make an experience that feels that you don't have to think about the controls.
Yeah.
Where you're just in the experience. I think that's what it all comes down to. I think it's less about the mechanics, because for years it's been a lot of making computer games with interesting mechanics to be able to control your character, or to be able to interact with your virtual set of deck of cards, or your collection of slave animals that you send to fight other slave animals. and it's less about those mechanics. Yeah. Less about the sort of how you interact with the game, and more about the experience while you're in it. And I think it took me a little while to get my head into a space where it seemed less of a restriction, less of a negative, and more that actually, no, this kind of frees you up in a lot of other ways. You no longer have to think or worry about the control scheme. That's no longer, other than making sure it works and is not a barrier to persistence.
Yeah.
It's not something that is a core part of the experience anymore, and that's nice.
It is, but so going back to this point that you brought up earlier, that sort of struck me as really interesting, was the being smacked in the face with the reality of what DK1 is, and how we thought virtual reality, the holodeck. I realized that this whole thing being day zero, we did have to adjust our expectations. But if you think about how, if you showed DK1 to people from 30 years ago, they would have been like, "What is this wizardry? What?" They would, their minds would have exploded.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I kind of still do. It's, and I think anyone who's been trying the kits recently must be feeling the same way.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things, though. You also get the cynicism on the side of people who write the articles along the lines of, this is just another fad. Mm-hmm. This is just another gimmick. This is just another silliness. And I think they're like, oh, it's just like 3D films. It's kind of like, no, you don't really get it, but I can understand why they think that way. I can understand, and it's good to have those adjusted. I think because I've thought about it in terms of making these experiences. I've gone through the best practices guide from Oculus, and you kind of have to think about the restrictions. You have to think about all those downsides if you want to make the most of the upsides. And I don't think it's a bad thing to kind of have those calibrated expectations. But of course, it's all about building up the sort of hyped, raised expectations as well. Because if you can meet them, that's also a good thing. Speaking of
the cynicism you talked about it, and just the overall reception of virtual reality, because this thing that's sprouting out of all sorts of places, it's a global. I don't know what to call it. I don't know if it's a movement. I don't know if it's progress. I don't know if it's the singularity starting to peer its head into human life. But whatever it is, how is the reception been in the UK? You're my first developer that I speak to from the UK. So when you bring up virtual reality at the pub or at the grocery store or at the family reunion, how do people react, or what's been the reaction so far?
I mean anyone who's vaguely aware. I mean anyone who I spoke to who's sort of aware enough of games, aware enough of sort of tech to have a passing interest, are all aware. They all they're like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. That's really cool. And I don't think many people have had the opportunity to try it, and then they've tried it, and people have, I mean, it might be the circles that I know, but people have. There's a palpable excitement, I think, as much as anywhere. And there's certainly, in terms of awareness in the media, I mean, the BBC, report on it all the time. The games magazines, that you see are all about it. I mean, Edge is a really big, well-known games magazine, I think, globally even, and they've been on, it's been on the front of their magazine a couple of times. Games, all the different magazines. It feels as if there's as much hype here as there is anywhere.
Awesome, really cool. So this week has been a pretty big week for virtual reality and just technology in general. We've seen DK2 being showed off at GDC. I was actually out there yesterday, and I got to try it out. We've seen Project Morpheus. We've seen Unreal Engine 4 being released, and at $20 subscription, source code, access. That's madness. And Crytek Engine $9.99 subscription. What do you make of all this? What's happening now? What is it?
It's pretty. I mean, I'd always had an interest in the tech side of things anyway, so I'd sort of followed stuff in a kind of passing interest, and I'd always wanted to do games. Ed always wanted, and it's only when Unity, I think Unity 4, and I was suddenly like, oh, well, let's try this. This looks like great fun, and I'd done some stuff in that. But this year, it's the first year I've been watching things from a developer point of view, and I think I've caught the wave just at the right time for certain things, because it's really crazy exciting. What did you think of the DK2 since you've tried it compared to the DK1? It's like comparing. It's like comparing black and white television to being inside somewhere else. It's weird. It's weird to describe, and it's weird to experience, because the Oculus has shown that they walk their talk, and they talk the walk. And it's, I tried E-Valkyrie, and when you put it on. Oh yeah. And that was really good. E-Valkyrie, you put it on, and it, I gotta, mind you, the spacing was kind of weird. I felt like the cockpit was kind of small. But aside from that, the low persistence, I would move my head around up, really quickly, shake my head, and it just, kept up with me. Not one-on-one, but it was just good enough that, my brain, I was doing barrel rolls, and I was not getting sim sickness at all.
So I am extremely excited for July because the DK2 is amazing. I mean, what I'm really excited for really is when developers like yourself get your hands on it and you're showing it off to people, and all of a sudden people will get to experience the boiler room and get to experience, my neighbor Totoro's recreation and with that much more, low latency and an amazing HD resolution. There's still a screen door effect. It's just not. It's easy. It's a lot easier to ignore. It's so much easier to ignore. Yeah. So I'm afraid people are gonna be throwing money at you somehow. They're gonna be like, "Why? How do I give you money so that you can make something happen?"
Yeah, people are welcome. No, there's a donations page. People can throw any money they want at me. I don't mind. No, I mean, this week has been amazing for me looking at it. I mean, I ordered a DK2 as soon as the page went up, and just as everyone else, was sort of panicking about the order confirmation page, but luckily they didn't charge me like 3 times or something, so that was nice.
Yeah.
But also the Unreal 4 engine, because before it's been like Unity, and it's like, all right, I can do stuff in Unity basically for free, and that works because I'm not making any money. So it's kind of, I can't justify spending. I have to pay for software for all my video work. I can't justify paying for stuff, and I can't really afford it if I can't make any money to pay that back. So yeah, Unity's been great, and so when Unreal, $20 a month, and you can use it, or alternatively, you can stop the subscription and continue using it.
Yeah,
and that's amazing. And of course, there are you pay them. I understand once you release your game, you give them 5% of your revenue, but that seems like a fair price considering. That's amazing, and especially because that's like a whole extra tool that might well be a better fit, a better option with more interesting choices than Unity. It's hard to know yet. I've not tried it out, and I've not seen enough to know if it's worth a switch. But for Unity and them now to be in a bit of a 2-horse race over, I guess indie devs and VR is really exciting stuff. Crytek's great. I don't think they've got a particularly strong Oculus support going on, so I don't know if that's really going to be a real choice for most people. But certainly Unreal and Unity, both look to be amazing. And the new Unity looks great as well. So I think they're both going to provide amazing bases to produce great experiences with, and I'm looking forward to trying them both out.
Yeah, the question now comes down to price, I would say. I mean, what did I hear? Excuse me, I heard that, and I hope I'm not spilling out rumors or bullshit. I think that what I heard was DK2 will not ship with any Unity Pro free trials.
Really? That's interesting.
So that's $1,500, of a trial that you won't get anymore.
Well, I mean, I made most of the Spirited Away stuff before I switched to the trial. So I made most of it.
Okay.
Without Rift at all. And it was only in the last few days that I switched across to just bring the Rift implementation in.
Okay.
But then I've got like a 4-month trial, and people have been donating to other devs their 4-month trials when they're not using it. I guess we've still got those floating around for a little while for Unity 4. I doubt they'll work with Unity 5. Once that runs out though, I get the feeling people might well switch to $20 a month. I mean, I can't see a reason not to.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you don't have to pay it. You can stop paying it and still use it. That sounds ideal to me.
True.
Practically, I'm probably not going to have $1,500 to spend on getting Unity. But then again, maybe that comes in a Kickstarter. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, are you? So the barrier to entry for Unreal is just that I mean, from what I hear, and I'm actually jumping into this game again myself. Is that the
Right.
how do you say the learning curve is a little bit higher in Unreal.
I think on Unity 3 or Unity SDK or whatever it was before this, yeah. I mean, it looked like it was really high. On the new one, I've seen a couple of tutorials, and it looks a little higher, but only so much as it's a different set of tool with a different approach.
Yeah.
I don't think it's crazy. I don't think there's any, Unity I didn't know coding. So for me, that's a massive learning curve anyway. I think with the new blueprint system, which is like a code-free developing thing for scripts,
yes,
it looks good. I think it's one of those things where people are just going to have to get stuck in. I think the thing is, well, obviously, it is aimed at non-coders, and it is aimed at the people who want to make these sort of, level of experiences in games. So there shouldn't really be a barrier except the amount of time and effort required, and that's always going to be, in anything you do that's worthwhile, I think.
Yeah, and the upside is that this is a AAA, game creation engine. This is what the big guys use. So it's not like,
I think the interesting Unity, their new lighting engine and stuff, and is using stuff from Battlefield 4, the same sort of third party wear for that. So it's nice to see they're both, in terms of the graphical fidelity, I think Unity might edge it, but not Unity, Unreal might edge it, but Unity looks to be pretty great as well. I think VR though it's one of those things where graphical fidelity has to be, it's always going to be dialed back a little bit because you're having to do 2 and you want to be up at 75 frames, 90 frames a second. You're going to have to dial it back a little bit. Yeah. So there's swings and roundabouts. It's an interesting time, certainly. I am really, really very, very excited to look at Unreal and see the possibilities. There's some stuff that I've just not been... I mean, I'm kind of thinking if I was to do the train scene from Spirited Away, where it goes out over that water, and I'm kind of looking at Unity at the moment and thinking, I don't see how it would be possible. At all, really. I mean, there's plugins that you can buy. Do I want to risk $100 on something that might not work? I don't know. It's a difficult one to know. But with Unreal and the new Unity, it looks as if they're kind of closer. I might be able to do it with that. So there's some very exciting times, I think, and indie stuff is. I think it was the past couple of years where my brain sort of came around to it, seeing the indie explosion, thinking, this looks possible, and then seeing Unity and thinking, oh no, this is possible, and then kind of thinking, all right, I'll give it a go from there. It's great to see that tools are no longer a barrier. They're just a kind of the opportunity now to put in the time and effort to make these things. I mean, they still require quite a lot of technical coding knowledge to do anything particularly complicated, but I guess that's when you start working in teams and getting other people involved.
Yeah. What's your take on Project Morpheus? Just in general, what do you think about what Sony is doing?
It looks pretty close to the DK2. I've seen Cymatic Bruce and a couple of others have said that the Rift is edging it a little on positional tracking. While the Morpheus has maybe got the screen door effect is slightly less obvious, but at the same time they're using an LCD, so I think there might be the new thing in the DK2, the low persistence on the screen. I think that might be a little bit better on the Rift. I think at the moment, if you were to compare the two, they're both pretty close. Yeah. So I think it's great that Sony have created a product that looks as if it will be released maybe next year and is as good as, pretty much as good as anything else. That's brilliant. You don't want them to release something that's half-hearted, a little bit rubbish, that people are going to dismiss. You don't want them to release the next PlayStation Move and have it then be abandoned because no one's really that interested.
Yeah.
No, I think it's great, and also they're not really competing directly. It's good for there to be two strong VR platforms, and developers. It's not going to be so much of a challenge to develop for both. Sony seemed pretty indie friendly, so I can't see it but a good thing, and certainly good enough. And looks as if it will be even better. Yeah, it's a good thing. I doubt I'll ever get a PlayStation 4 or I don't see myself getting one. I had a PlayStation 3 right at the end for a couple of the games that came out, but I'm not desperate to get a PlayStation 4, but it's nice to know that they're doing it seriously. And, it looks like they've been developing it for years. It's just recently that, with Oculus that they've kind of, but they're both so similar.
Yeah.
Because it feels like they're all riding the crest of the wave in terms of affordable, cutting edge technology.
Indeed.
So I think this is where VR is at, and it would be a little unrealistic to expect anyone to create anything better at the same sort of price point.
Have you been monitoring our Oculus, by the way? Have you seen this anonymous user been posting these quote unquote Sony leaks? Yeah.
I don't think any of it's true. I think it's all fake. If they got some rumors that they then come true, then fine. But there was a couple of bits that were said that were just like, this doesn't ring true. And also it's the fact there's so much detail.
Yeah.
It's just too much. If it was a few bullet points, I'd be more inclined to believe it. All the detail. He also wrote, I've been officially authorized to leak this information.
Okay.
And I'm like, what, by the guy who's not officially authorized to leak stuff? The language just is extremely suspect. I wouldn't put any faith in it at all.
I am naive and gullible, and easily taken advantage of, because I want to believe this is happening. It's just such great storytelling, anyways. In my mind, there's three narratives happening in my mind. There's one, this guy is a troll. He's just trolling our Oculus. Two, this is Sony's marketing team. Somehow trying to gauge this community, because what is the one place you go to for virtual reality, discussion? In my mind, Oculus forums are great for developers, but just for enthusiasts and community as a whole, our Oculus is the place to be. Or three, this is legit.
I don't think it's legit. I think it's elaborate fan fiction.
Yeah.
And wishful thinking. I think it's great, though, in a way, because it does stimulate a bit of debate and a bit of, conversation about where things should be.
Mm-hmm.
I think Sony will pay attention, not necessarily to that directly, but to the ambient conversation around VR.
Yeah.
And think about that. But not necessarily, it's just as they would with anything. I think it's good to have a conversation. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just don't believe it for a second. Not that none of it's realistic or that it won't happen, but just that I don't believe there's anything officially there at all.
Follow me down the conspiracy theory road, because I got to speak to I went to the VR Mixer last night, and I got to meet a couple of Oculus engineers. Really awesome guys, and they wouldn't say a damn thing in terms of questions that I had, nothing specific, but that's a given. I wasn't trying to get too much anyways. Great guys to talk to, Boone and Julian. You guys are really cool. Thanks, for hanging out. And I got to see the back of Palmer's head, so that was cool too.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
that's good.
but when I asked them, do you guys monitor our Oculus? Do you guys go on our Oculus? They're like, oh, all the time. He's 70 to 80% of the stuff. One of them told me that he sees, he notices, he's paying attention to. So in my mind, if Oculus is paying attention to this community, why not Sony? And so
yeah, they probably are.
And so that's why I'm thinking this is Sony's marketing team.
Yeah.
This could be a tactic by Sony to again gauge the community, see where people's perspectives are coming from, or what the people want. But it's conspiracy theory.
It could be.
But who knows? It could be.
Let's say it is. Let's go with that.
Okay.
Let's say yes. This is officially what it is.
Okay. Oh man, have you thought about for developing? I don't know if I asked you this already, but developing for Project Morpheus, or is this?
No, I would be shocked if anyone asked me to develop for Project Morpheus. Maybe if I created an original project that they particularly liked, I would be shocked if they hadn't approached a bunch of other developers under NDAs, about the more developed stuff that would be a good fit for PlayStation. I mean, you can see obviously Valkyrie. I'm sure they've approached anything that they think is particularly valuable. I think the little demo projects, certainly my own, they may. It's a little bit rough and ready at the edges, so probably doesn't reflect the PlayStation brand in the way that they would want to. And also, there's copyright issues, so I doubt they'll touch anything like that.
Yeah, man, this thing is unraveling. How fast do you think? Now we're in the realm of speculation. Do you think this will become mainstream, and what will it take for virtual reality to become mainstream? What set of factors in your mind have to happen?
I mean, in terms of what you would describe mainstream, I don't know. Once Sony releases the product, I guess that's already mainstream. Once that's on PlayStation 4 and it sells a few 100,000 or whatever, that's kind of mainstream. In terms of mainstream in the way that we would, think of mainstream. I think we're a few years off, only because thinking in terms of mainstream would be, smartphones, the way they exploded and all this stuff. It's difficult to know because it's not, people do not experience, it's a bit like MMOs. If you look at MMOs, is World of Warcraft mainstream? I mean, it is in terms of, it's the most mainstream MMO, and it's obviously it's referenced in South Park, and it's people know of it, but I wouldn't say that MMOs of that genre are particularly mainstream. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't see. Are they? I just don't know. It's a bit of a grey area, and also it's a little bit of a marketing term that I think is a bit, I guess, meaningless when it comes to it, and also not that important. I don't think it matters if VR becomes mainstream as such. I think it matters if it becomes something that's a worthwhile experience, that people get something really valuable from, and it is self-sustaining. I think that's more important than mainstream, that it is self-sustaining. Yeah. And it's not something that requires life support, like Kinect, like Move, like motion controls. They require a bit of life support to hang around. If the hardware manufacturers decided to drop them, they wouldn't be around long. People would forget about them. 3D movies, it requires life support to keep them going. Yeah. It would be nice if VR could get to the point where it doesn't require that sort of life support, where it's self-sustaining. I think it will always, now the technology is here, it will always be around. It would be nice for it to become big enough that it is recognised as its own sort of medium. I think that's it as well, rather than as a peripheral, which it still will be viewed as for a while. I think for it to be viewed as its own platform, that'll be good.
Yeah. So we visited the realm of speculation. We've walked down the conspiracy road. Now let's take a stroll through Crazy Town, because I'm of the opinion that I have this virtual reality thing, and I might be 100% wrong, but I'm still throwing my 2 cents out there. I think that this virtual reality thing could very well be in our lifetime. I don't know when. In a whole economy, a self-sustaining economy where people could exchange goods, ideas, goods through 3D printed models, ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's already there.
Yeah.
In terms of that, I don't think it would be VR as a discrete entity.
Yeah.
I think you've already got Bitcoin, you've already got 3D printing, you've already got, VR as an experience. It's already sort of, the pieces are already there. I think it will converge better and be more of a, you look at Android and that sort of smartphone platform, or as iOS and iPhone, that's its own little economy and platform. Yeah. I think it can get to that stage, certainly. But yeah, it will do, definitely. Within our lifetime, within a few years, it will get there. Whether it gets to the stage where people, I've not read Snow Crash, and I probably should. I might wait for the movie. People talk about the multiverse, I think it's called, and I might have got that wrong.
Metaverse, yeah.
Metaverse. Oh no, I already got it wrong.
It's okay.
And I've got a vague understanding what that is. I think people's kind of retro future visions of VR are probably inaccurate. Yep. I don't think VR is going to be for a while that all-encompassing.
Yeah.
It's certainly a different medium that you will be able to put on a VR helmet and enjoy it in different ways. I don't know if necessarily we want to... It's like PlayStation Home. The idea that you will go to PlayStation Home, have your little avatar, go around, chat to people, go into a lobby, play games. Well, it's just a pain. You don't want... It's not efficient. You don't want to walk your avatar over to this game lobby, walk into the lobby, go up to someone. It's a pain. You don't want to do that. It's not efficient. And I think there will the idea that there will be virtual lobbies where you float around is a little bit... There might be, but it's not particularly... Doesn't feel like it's the actual future. It feels like someone's retro vision of what the future might be.
Yeah. If anything, those virtual lobbies, where you can just stroll around, could, I don't think you're right. I've never thought of the PlayStation Home as being that, inefficient. Because I remember going inside PlayStation Home, a few years ago, and it's just been like all I'm doing is walking around, man. Like, what am I doing here? What am I doing with my life?
That's what will happen with a lot of VR attempts to do something similar.
But I think that's where
it's not very moving, I don't think.
Yeah, that's where we can take advantage of the fact that VR could be a social experience, and just how you and I can walk down the street and have a conversation. I feel like we could have a conversation in VR, because really in my mind it's going to be the multiplayer. It's going to be these social experiences in virtual reality where we can be walking down the Death Star together and having a nice chat.
No, those are absolutely going to happen, and already we've got Reverend Carl with his Rift Max Theatre thing.
Mm-hmm.
His his great big talk show, and his experience there, which is great. And I think those sort of things, those discrete experiences,
definitely,
where you go into that experience and it's a set experience, that'll definitely happen. It's already happening. It's going to be big. It's going to be amazing. I don't think an all-encompassing VR universe will arise in the same way, and that's fine. It doesn't need to.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be all tied together. It should be more free flowing, and yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up. There's no roadmap. There's no way, in my mind, maybe I lack the imagination, but I don't see how an all-encompassing virtual reality universe could exist. I did read Ready Player One, and these books and movies about what this virtual reality future could look like, I think, most of the time are just dystopian, are just like, where things went wrong. And in a sense, I look at Hollywood and I look at these books and, I see blueprints of what not to do, humanity. Let's not make the Matrix. That
comes down to the fiction as well. They're dystopian stories, and the world that they present is one that presents those themes of dystopianness within the presentation of VR, and even a utopian vision, like you might get in Ian M. Banks' books, is just a little, I think, it's a nice thing to think about, but I think it's more of a thought experiment than a practical good use of VR. Look, I mean, it's like the internet. We have a platform where everyone, connects through the same data channels, and we can all go into Reddit and stuff, but there's no barrier. It's just you go to Reddit, it's an instant thing. If you had to float there in VR first, I think you'd go crazy. I think it's the idea that you would slow down your connection to data, and you would introduce that extra weird barrier. I don't think it's going to happen.
That's a really good point. No, that's a really good point. Because it's so fast and seamless already. What could VR add that we don't have yet to make that a process of learning and having and acquiring more information even faster? Yeah. Exactly.
I think it's the same. It's the same mistake people make about translating film or games to VR. Is the assumption that we're going to, and it's the assumption that we need to translate. It's like with games trying to become films, like they have done for decades, and actually the most compelling games do not pretend they're films, and they just take the parts that make sense and use them in a good way. Like the idea that we're gonna all learn better within VR. Well, there's certain things that might be good in VR in terms of demonstrating things, scientific, Titans of Space is great for learning about the solar system.
Yeah.
And I can see discrete experiences that can better visualize information. But the idea that we're going to go into some kind of virtual learning tutor and we're going to get this clockwork orange vision coming at us that will fill our brains with knowledge. I might be misrepresenting people's claims of what will happen. I don't think anything like that will. I think but the possibilities and opportunities are still amazing. And
indeed.
But yeah, more discrete, more individual, more kind of diverse, rather than this homogeneousness of VR, I think is the way it's going to go.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. How that homogeneity of teaching, it's just sticking with the point of education. Our current models, at least here in the state, our current status quo of learning is complete shit. It sucks. School did not prepare me for the real world. It's just a sad thing. I think that we're using these, the industrial era models of education, this factory line, one size fits all sort of way of looking at education, and I think that what you're pointing to is a really good lesson that, even in VR, we should not make that mistake of trying to box people into, and creating this one size fits all model.
Yeah, I think I think that was even really obvious recently with the Technology Alliance team that Oculus briefly left.
Mm-hmm.
And I say briefly, they've not gone back, but the idea that everyone should be under a single alliance, you can see why Oculus weren't willing to be a part of that. And yeah, I think the idea that standards are going to have to be imposed, it's probably I think there was all this idea that we have to have some kind of, I don't know the technical side enough to say whether it's a good idea or not, or standards, like that we shouldn't have competing standards. And I don't know whether that's a bad thing. I don't know. It seems to me a kind of academic question that is better answered or asked by people at Sony and Oculus, whether they want to collaborate rather than it makes any difference to people on our level.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up. I haven't, from a technical perspective, one of the things that developers I speak to fear is this fragmentation of the industry becoming fragmented and people developing in one sector and others, it's sort of like, it feels sort of like the gaming industry right now, where Sony has their exclusives and Microsoft has their exclusives, and if you want to play The Last of Us, you gotta buy a PS3. As a whole,
that I think comes down to publishing deals, really. I mean,
yeah.
You can have Last of Us on PC if you want,
right?
But Sony doesn't want you to.
So it's not a question of standards in your mind.
I don't think there's really. That's more about, I guess, the realities of Sony existing within the market at all.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have. I don't know. I guess I don't see any of that as a problem. The only problem for me is, if I want to play The Last of Us, I have to have a PlayStation 3. If I want to play, I think exclusives have always been a bit of a pain.
Yeah.
But there's lots of games. There's lots of experiences. There's plenty to take up our time.
So from a developer perspective, if because you can't, for some reason, your game, it wouldn't be exclusives and publishing being out the window, not being included. If there's a standard that you're using that isn't compatible with Sony's, does that hurt your bottom line in the long run?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's a business model question, really. If your business model, if you're making a game, you kind of need to take those things into account. If you've only got one market to hit, you make sure that you're creating a product so that your realistic sales can cover your costs. It's a bit like films. Films have to make twice back their budget.
Yeah. So
if you've got a $300 million film and it makes $500 million, well, it's a flop. If you've got $1 million film and it makes, $4 million, that's an amazing success. And I think it's probably the same with games. If you've got a game that's only available on PlayStation, well, then PlayStation people have to like it and buy it.
Yeah.
I don't think it doesn't feel like it's an important. It's nice to get obviously out to as many people as possible. I don't think you have to get out to millions. I don't think you have to get out to 100,000 people to be a success. It would be nice if you didn't have to. It'd be nice if you can get out to 10,000 people and to be able to view that as a success, because 10,000 people enjoyed your product and paid it and enjoyed it. That would be nice to view that as a success.
Let me play the devil's. Go ahead.
The good thing is, it took me 5 weeks to make Spirited Away. I mean, it's very short as the experience goes. If I spent 6 months on something, as long as I've got enough, earnings from that to cover me and a bit more to support whatever I do next, I don't feel I need to make the big bucks. It's kind of, yeah. I guess it depends if you're a bigger developer or in a different place. Mm-hmm. Might be different. I don't know.
Well, and that's exactly where I'm going, because I'm playing the devil's advocate on this one. For a sec. When it's not a question of if, but when VR gets to a point where the EA and Ubisoft and the bigger publishers are taking paying really close attention, so much attention that they're gonna jump in this game. And mind you, places, publishers and studios like Rockstar, they released Grand Theft Auto 5, and in the first day they made $1 billion. Wow! If I were then an executive at that company, this is my expectation. This is what I'm aiming for. I'm aiming for the fences. Does that affect does that mentality of monetizing, making more and more money off of this medium? Will that affect you? What's your take on it? What do you think about this?
I think it's just a business model. EA and that are always going to target those massive franchises.
Yeah.
And they're always going to want to target, for VR, the difficult thing for them at the moment is there's not a big enough base for that sort of investment. They have to play their cards carefully. Sony is in a different place. They're building up their platform. They can do it in a different way. I imagine it's a very scary thing for executives at Sony to be putting money on that one. but for me, the barrier to entry is as low as it's ever been. I can work at the moment pretty much for free making things. I mean, I might, if I skip to, Unreal, that's $20.
Mm-hmm.
There's the barriers to entry are really low. It then just comes down to making sure it's worth my while to continue. I want to be able to view it. It's a good thing to be able to view it as more than just a hobby. If it's just a hobby, well, I can take it or leave it. I do it as long as it's fun. If I view it as a business potentially as well, then I'm putting more effort and time and investment and taking it more seriously.
Yeah.
And in that, I have to be able to view it that at some point I'm going to be able to justify that time investment. But like I say, it doesn't have to sell to hundreds of thousands to make that worthwhile, and there are a lot of ways and means to make a business model that makes enough sense to continue. You look at with YouTube, there are two models currently. There's your advertising model, where if you get hundreds of thousands of views or millions of views, you make thousands of dollars back, and then there's the Patreon route, where you get people to pre-fund you and you make videos based upon that. Those are two great business models, and people are making a living off of them. Mm-hmm. I think, with games, you've got loads of models as well, with advertising in game, and you've got, freemium apps. They're not all bad. Some of them, most of them are, but they're not all bad. And you can, do great things on sales. I think it's one of those things where if you're not able to make enough money to support your business, then you've got a poor business model, or your product's not very good. I guess it's just, free market stuff. Just making sure you're justifying your own existence.
Yeah, well, yeah, I've never seen it that way. Well, let's take a stroll back. Let's make a U-turn back into Crazy Town. Because I have another question that inhabits my mind. What do you think is the, in terms of the hardware? Where does it end? Where are we gonna be in our lifetime, perhaps, or not? Who knows? Connected neurologically to the virtual world. I mean, so right now, yeah, DK1 is, it's the LCD panel, 1200 by 800. Now it's gonna be 1080p. I've been hearing rumors that they want, the consumer version to be even higher fidelity, high resolution.
Yeah.
5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, what does this look like? Where are we taking this?
The current standard that we see, the screen in front of your eyes, the optics, the position tracking, that'll all get better. I mean, 5 years from now, you're probably looking at 4K screens. I can't imagine why not.
Yeah.
Positional tracking, within meters, because you'll have a couple of cameras or something. Or a completely different, system based off something else. That kind of very much headset-based approach, in 5 years, it's going to be spectacular. Mm-hmm. And also, there's other ways, the eye tracking technology with foveated rendering, which I don't pretend to understand, and the way that the anaglyph, is it called? The other headset with... the
Albagon glyph. Yeah, the Albagon glyph, the one that shoots light through 2 million mirrors, micro mirrors.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. I mean, in terms of experience, they've got a low field of view and stuff, but the technology, things like that, mm-hmm. Where it's projected into your eyes and things, and I think once you've got the audio and the visuals down, and the positional tracking down, 5 years' time we're going to have that. So that as far as a headset goes, 5 years, it'll be amazing. It'll be as good as, you need it. 10 years, it's going to be spectacular. Beyond that, who knows? I kind of don't... the idea that you're going to plug something into your brain, I feel is a little science fiction-y still. It's sort of... it feels a bit like singularity talk to me, which I find annoying and a little bit pretentious in many ways, because people will swear blind the singularity is going to happen, and you try and pin them down on what the singularity is, and it's a little bit rough around the edges. They mean different things. Sometimes it means AI is going to overtake humans or something.
Mm-hmm.
Or, we're going to upload our brains. I don't think that's ever going to happen. We're never going to upload our brains to computers. I don't think that's ever going to be possible.
Are you sure? How is that? How can you be so sure?
I think there's something... I won't say never. But I think the idea that we will be able to capture the very smallest sparks within neurons when it's down to the quantum level, and we don't quite know how that information is stored. Everyone's brain is unique. I just don't think, in terms of the technical side, we even have the slightest understanding enough of how that works. So if we can't upload our brains, I don't know, can we plug things into them? Probably. It's all physically based. I guess one day it might happen. It feels as if we don't know enough. It's like saying back in the 1800s, are we going to fly to the moon? And someone's saying, well, we flap the wings hard enough. Yeah, I guess. If you did, you'd get enough force to leave the atmosphere, I guess. But it's just one of those things where I think we're thinking in the wrong ways. We don't quite know enough to be able to know what that would actually mean. Yeah, you see what I mean? I just don't think we're quite there to... It just becomes science fiction at that point. Which, science fiction is great. I love science fiction. I just think it's a little bit like badly written science fiction.
Yeah, I think, there's definitely validity to the point that you mentioned, that in terms of whoever is, talking about the singularity being, whether it's Kurzweil to your average guy on the street, has no idea what the fuck they're talking about, because there really is no way to predict what this thing might look like, where this technology thing ends, but at the same time, it's like this is a reality where we live in, where crazier things have happened. When I remember someone posted on Reddit something where in 1900, in the beginning of the 20th century, someone said, someone wrote an article somewhere on either New York Times, I can't recall, but they were saying how we won't be able to fly for another 1,000 years. And 14 years later, the Wright brothers were doing it. And so what we're doing, I think, especially in the age of information that we live in, we are, it's just so much harder to say definitively, no, this isn't going to happen. I'm cautiously optimistic. I try to stay skeptical, but I mean, we are seeing some immense advances in neuroscience lately that are, that again, 50 years from now, people will look at us and be like, those monkeys, what were they thinking? What?
I tell you what. All right, I tell you what. I will say maybe we'll be able to upload our brain images. I don't think we'll be able to leave our brains. I don't think we'll put our consciousness into something else. I don't think that will ever be possible.
Cool. Well, that's a good middle ground. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. This has been an amazing conversation, Mr. Nick Pitton. I would love to keep going for hours and hours on this singularity VR thing, but we're gonna have to call it a day here. Again, You've been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. How can people stay in touch? Anything? How can people support what you're doing? All that good stuff.
Go to my WordPress, my blog. That's got all about the VR progress. I'm on Reddit, on the Oculus forum all the time, but Red of Poor otherwise. And those two are probably the best places. Twitter as well, at Red of Poor on Twitter. But yeah, you can email me or whatever. I'm happy to speak to whoever.
Awesome. So there you go, Nicholas Pitton. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks very much. Cheers.